By Laura Blumenfeld. She's a former US State Department official. Laura, thanks for being with us. First of all, how serious is what we've seen here today with Israel deciding to reactivate these, as the Prime Minister called them, powerful strikes on Gaza?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry to see this, but I'm not surprised. We're kind of in a peace deal purgatory. We're trapped between phase one and phase two, which are the rest of those 20 points. Nobody wants to return to that utter hell of war. As Vice President Vance said today, these are skirmishes. So I think that's what we can expect to see: sabotage, strikes, suspicion, and further skirmishes. But I don't think we're going to spiral all the way back to where we were a month ago.
Can they be described as skirmishes if they are airstrikes killing civilians?
Well, these are deadly strikes, and we shouldn't belittle that. There is sort of deadly game right now of truth and consequences being played out in the ceasefire negotiation toward the next stage. Netanyahu is operating under a very simple principle, going back to Hammurabi's Code, or the Old Testament if you have it, which is, he who harms us, we will harm. And as defense minister is saying many times over, they no longer believe in a kind of proportionate response after October 7th. So from their point of view, not only have the hostages not been returned, which was the deal that was struck, there was a piecemeal return of one hostage, Ophir Tsarfati, whose part of his remains were returned 2 years ago, and then just another piece of it was returned. He was a 27-year-old at a music festival. So again, this was Israel's response, but they didn't actually trigger those strikes until their own troops came under assault. So I think for Netanyahu, he's trying to show some restraint, and by the United States, who are trying to hold this peace deal together, told him, try to, hold back on your response. But once the troops, the IDF troops, Israel Defense Forces, come under fire, I think for them that was just too far, and it's back to the deadly strikes.
I suppose, though, from the first days of this ceasefire, we did see Israel withholding levels of aid that it had committed to restore, not reopening crossings that it had committed to reopen. At what point does the US sort of, tolerate what's going on here, and at what point does it decide that some further action from its part is needed?
Well, actually, it's a good question, and it's at that point. Because when Israel threatened to withhold aid, in fact, the Trump administration said, no, you won't. That is not acceptable. Instead, Trump, threatened over the weekend. He said, Hamas, don't play games with these hostage bodies. It's cruel. It's grotesque. And the response will be fast and furious if you don't comply. And he gave them a 48-hour deadline. But he put his foot down on this issue of aid.
Where does that leave the regional partners, Laura?
Well, I think it's fascinating. The internationalization of this peace deal does moderate politically, I think, Prime Minister Netanyahu, because, first of all, the United States has an intense stake, both economically in the region, and they're able to kind of monitor Netanyahu, at least diplomatically and politically, and in some sense militarily, because he's up for re-election in 2026. So the kind of more parties that you involve, that is the good thing. The problem is that the parties who are involved actually committing on the ground are Qatar and Turkey, who have a very antagonistic relationship with Israel relative, let's say, to the Emiratis and Saudi Arabia. It was really concerning to me on that day of the peace summit, when President Trump was celebrating and toasting this kind of ceasefire, that those two regional Gulf powers were absent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, they were notable in their absence, all right. Well, I suppose we'll wait to see what happens in the hours and days ahead. Laura Blumenfeld, former US State Department official, thank you very much for joining us here on BBC News.
Thank you.